Welcome back to Outdoors with Larry Ray on ESPN 790 AM. Brought to you proudly by the Tennessee Wildlife and Resources Agency.
Hey, welcome back to Outdoors with Larry Ray. As we talk outdoors every Saturday morning, the fastest 90 minutes in outdoor radio programming. Recently had our 19th anniversary, and I've been real privileged, Mary and myself, to have known Debbie and Rob for a long time through our association with Tennessee Outdoor Writers Association, the CIOPA, which are all family when it comes down to it. And I recently found some pictures of us at Reelfoot of us paddling through there that I sent to Rob, and I've posted and everything. But Rob has written another book, which is a thing that he does. I mean, he has the ability.
He made me write?
Yes, he can write. Yes, he can.
Okay, I know he can sing.
Yes, he can. We're going to get to that. Southern Wildlife Watcher, Notes of a Naturalist. We've talked with Rob about the book itself. Rob, I got to switch gears just a little bit here because,
Sure.
you got an amazing story. Somebody needs to write a story about Rob Simbeck because of where you've been and where you started. And you talk about Debbie and the influence she's had. He lives a country gentleman's life. I mean, in Nashville with critters and things along that line. They have a garden. I follow their garden pictures as I post Miriam's garden pictures. We're kind of comparing gardens here and everything like that. But away from this other thing, Rob, it appears that you just love to do what you're doing. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself because they want to read the book, but they like to know a little bit about the author itself. Tell our listeners a little bit about your journey.
Okay, I'll see if I can't do the 2-minute version of my life, as I sometimes.
No, you got 5. You got 5. Throw in some extras. Yeah. Throw in some 3 minutes more.
Even better. I grew up in a little German Catholic town in Pennsylvania, and when the Beatles hit the Ed Sullivan Show and I started reading science fiction, I figured out that there were people who made a living writing books and singing songs. And
Yes.
I thought, that is the ticket. I got to figure out how to do that. And these days, if somebody says, do you mind signing my copy of your book? I say, no, that's why I paid attention in English class. So someday I could sign books. But I started a band when I was 12 and started writing poetry and stuff there. In college, I sang in clubs and again started writing for the school newspaper. My first real job out of college was on a daily newspaper, and like I do, that's the best possible training.
Yes,
as a general assignment reporter, which is what I still consider myself, on a daily newspaper, you can end up covering, and in my case, this was the early to mid-'70s, so
Yes.
there was the oil crisis, so I covered the oil industry because I was in the oil country of Pennsylvania. I covered music. I covered politics. We had a politician who got caught up in a scandal. I covered trials. I reviewed concerts and plays, covered the sewage board, everything you can think of. And so, and in those days, you had a typewriter and a telephone.
Yes, you did.
And you had a couple hours to turn around the story, something big and important. And you figured out how to get a hold of people and how to put it in prose quickly.
Yes.
And if you got things wrong, the whole town would tell you the next day. So it's, you don't need grad school as a writer. You don't need an MBA or MFA if you go to work for a daily newspaper. And I still loved music. I had a band in upstate New York, did the Finger Lakes region and played there, kept writing poetry and stuff, moved to Los Angeles in 1980, became a magazine editor and had a band and wrote songs, and moved to Nashville in 1982 as a songwriter. And the parallel part of all of this was that one of the requirements, as I saw it, for being a writer and a musician was, shall we say, intoxicating beverages. And it all caught up with me in the 80s, and I finally set those down and got some help. And I have not had a drink in 33-plus years right now. And that's the reason I'm standing here. That part of the journey is what makes all the rest possible. I firmly believe that you've got to get yourself centered in the spiritual sense, or the rest of it's not going to come. And that's what happened for me. And doors just opened, being centered, a little hard work, a little luck here and there. I came here as a songwriter, could never make a living at it, but met everybody in town, got little cuts here and there, and then when I realized I wasn't going to make a living at it, I started writing bios for singers.
You did, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, everybody from Shania Twain and Brooks and Dunn to Merle, to Waylon Jennings, Loretta Lynn, and then up through the newest people I'm working on right now for a guy named Hardy, who's a real big songwriter, had quite a few hits, Carrie Underwood, Blake Shelton, and people became friends. And that's one of the reasons I could get endorsement quotes from Leanne Womack and Kix Brooks from Brooks and Dunn,
yes,
and others, was that those things cross. I mean, country singers are country people. They hunt, they fish, they know birds and wildlife. They buy big properties that they can, custom make to have wildlife around them. And those two worlds have merged really well. As you said, we got a garden. I'm looking at 3 feeders right now out the window. Debbie and I love nature. When we travel, it's always part of what we do, and it makes for good life. And the people in the outdoor writers and communicators that I know are among the finest people I have ever met, and I don't have a single complaint about the journey that's led me here. And this book is, out of everything I've written, out of more than 20, is the most personal. It's the most me.
It is.
It's my chance to talk about myself through the lens of nature.
Well, I know that we lost the great Charlie Daniels recently, but we couldn't do this unless we mentioned Bob Kingsley. I mean, Bob, what that man meant to you and what he meant to your career. So tell our listeners a little bit about that in another 2 minutes here. So,
I met Bob Kingsley when I was hired to write his bio back in 1995, and we hit it off. The interview went well. He liked the bio, and a couple months later, he called and said, "I had a guy who left. I liked meeting you and thought you did a good job on the interview. Would you like to try radio?" And I had never done, I'd done a little radio, but not much.
Yeah.
And so I did his interviews. If he played, and Bob Kingsley, for those who don't know, had a countdown show.
Yes.
It was originally American Country Countdown, then it became Bob Kingsley's Country Top 40. He'd count down the top 40 hits of the week every
That's
week,
right.
like Casey Kasem used to do.
Yes. Yeah.
And I wrote part of the show and did his interviews, and I loved the man. We traveled a lot together. We worked with him for 25 years, and he died last October, and I retired from radio when he did. The show's still going on with a new host, and I've wished them well, but I didn't want to do it without working with Bob. He just meant the world to me.
Well, I know that, and I wanted to throw that in there. Again, we're talking to Rob Simbeck. Rob, you've got to have Gene Smith is the master. We're the only radio station, only outdoor radio show that I know has their own poet laureate. We have a man who does the poem, Charlie Covington. We have the only pun master. Gene, give Rob Simbeck a pun before we leave here.
Okay, he's talking about newspapers, and of course, what he does, what the old saying is, if you love your work, it's not work. Anyway, this man's friend died, named Jim, and he went to the newspaper to put in a thing about his obituary, and the guy said, "What are you going to put in?" He said, "Jim died." He said, is that all you want to do?" He said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, you're allowed 5 words to the minimum." He said, "Okay, Jim died, boat for sale."
I'm sorry. We wanted to kind of that was a segue into this. Rob Simbeck.
I've got a question for Rob.
All right, do it. Rob can answer your question, Dave Gabbert.
Are you still running? This guy's a marathon runner.
No,
he loves blueberry pie too much now, I think. So
exactly. I ran for 20 years. I went from when I quit drinking, I had all this time where the hangovers and and the drinking used to go. And I started walking around the block, and eventually I ran the Boston Marathon. And finally, one day, my doctor looked at me and said, "Your knees are still in pretty good shape, but if you keep running, they're not going to be. You have a choice. You can start walking, or you can keep running until we have to replace your knees." And so I've been walking for probably the last 8 or 10 years.
And you've done a good job. You're a good walker. That's for sure. You're a Tennessee walker, Rob. So
there you go.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob Simbeck. Tell Debbie hello.
Before we go,
yes.
Please let's let your listeners know.
Yes, tell them
that they can get this book at Novel, the bookstore in Memphis, Barnes & Noble there.
Yes.
You can order it online. Probably the best way to find it is just to Google Rob Simbeck, the Southern Wildlife Watcher, or go to my website, robsimbeck.com. And if you Google it, you will find somebody willing to sell it to you.
Well, and,
right.
and we'll have it. It's on lroutdoors.com, my website too. Again, Rob, thank you, man. 2 segments. I hope we didn't wear you down. You're up sipping
always
coffee.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. I miss you. I hate the fact that we can't have our normal conferences this year. I can't wait to sit down and pick and grin. And I hope you have given your listeners at some point your version of Del Shannon and the other greats that you channel so well.
Well, hats off to Larry. He's going to make when I do my final show here, that's what it'll be. Okay? All right. Thank you, Rob. Have a great one, buddy.
Okay, take care, guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Let's take a break on Outdoors with Larry Ray. Be right back.